One scratch, and the heart stops. Some murders leave absolutely no mystery behind. A gunshot, a knife wound, a body dumped in an alley. The world instantly understands what happened. There's a victim, a weapon, and a killer on the loose. But there's another, much quieter kind of murder. The kind that never announces itself. A diplomat collapses at a dinner table. Doctors shake their heads. The death certificate reads, cardiac arrest, and everyone assumes it was just nature taking its course, not an enemy government. Every intelligence agency on Earth has dreamed of perfecting this exact scenario. The perfect assassination isn't about firepower. It's about absolute deniability. If there's no wound, there's no crime to solve and no one to punish. For a brief window during the Cold War, the CIA actually built this exact weapon. It was a device so small, silent, and precisely engineered that it could kill a target and leave zero trace. No bullet, no blade. Just a stopped heart and an unsolvable mystery. That is, unless someone decided to talk, and someone eventually did. The true scale of this secret was finally exposed in a packed Washington, D.C. room in the late summer of 1975. Reporters leaned forward with notepads as cameras rolled. At the center sat a soft-spoken senator from Idaho named Frank Church, a man mostly unknown to the American public until that very moment. Church was handed an almost impossible task. Following the Watergate scandal and a presidential resignation, the public's trust in the government was in ruins. Whispers were circulating that the CIA had been doing far more than just gathering foreign intelligence. There were rumors of illegal domestic spying, mind control experiments, and assassination plots run by an agency answering to virtually no one. So, the Senate took unprecedented action. They formed the Select Committee to study governmental operations with respect to intelligence activities, which went down in history simply as the Church Committee. What they uncovered didn't just embarrass the CIA. It completely terrified an American public that thought they already knew the worst. Frank Church was an unlikely choice to lead such an explosive investigation. Having survived a severe cancer scare in his 20s, he was known as a careful, deliberate legislator rather than a headline chaser. His colleagues trusted him to handle the investigation without turning it into a political circus. He needed every bit of that credibility because the committee was about to uncover decades of deeply disturbing scandals. Even before revealing the dart gun, the committee had exposed the family jewels. An internal CIA report cataloging years of illegal operations. This included domestic surveillance of anti-war activists, mass opening of private mail, and assassination plots against leaders like Fidel Castro and Patrice Lumumba. By the time CIA Director William Colby testified that September morning, the public was braced for the worst. But they definitely weren't prepared for the weapon sitting right on the table. On September 16, 1975, a visibly uneasy Colby admitted to the committee that the CIA had secretly stockpiled shellfish toxin. According to estimates, they had enough to kill thousands of people. Enough. This toxin was supposed to have been destroyed years prior under a presidential order, but it hadn't been. Then Church asked a historical question. Did the director bring anything with him today? An aide reached into a case and pulled out what looked like an ordinary scope-fitted Colt 45. But this gun didn't fire bullets. It fired an almost invisible projectile designed to erase a life without ever announcing a weapon was used. The room fell dead silent. Reporters stared while senators leaned in for a closer look. The next morning, newspapers across the country ran photos of Church holding the device, featuring a headline that felt almost surreal: the CIA's heart attack gun. The origins of this weapon trace back to Fort Detrick, a guarded compound in Frederick, Maryland. Officially, it was the Army's Biological Research Center. Unofficially, inside its Special Operations Division, the Army and the CIA were running a joint program dubbed Project MKNAOMI. MKNAOMI had one true purpose: weaponizing the invisible, numbers and debt. They wanted to turn medical and biological tools into untraceable instruments of death. During the peak of Cold War paranoia, American intelligence feared the Soviets were miles ahead in this exact field. Falling behind wasn't just a strategic risk, it was viewed as an existential threat. To truly grasp the darkness of what was happening inside Fort Detrick, you have to understand the psychological landscape of the era and the kind of men who were given a blank check to operate in the shadows. The most infamous of these figures was Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, known internally as the CIA's poisoner-in-chief. Gottlieb was the dark genius behind the agency's most horrifying Cold War initiatives, including the notorious MK-Ultra mind control program. While MK Naomi focused heavily on biological weapons, the philosophy was identical. The human body was merely another battlefield to be hacked, manipulated, or destroyed without leaving a footprint. At Fort Detrick, the paranoia wasn't just palpable. It was the entire business model. Intelligence reports flooding in from the Korean War suggested that the Soviets and Chinese had mastered terrifying new forms of biological warfare and brainwashing. The West felt like they were fighting blindfolded. In response, the CIA decided they needed to be capable of absolute, untraceable violence. They weren't just researching weapons to win a war. They were researching ways to play God in total silence. The scientists operating under this umbrella were given unprecedented autonomy. They were insulated from standard military oversight and completely shielded from public accountability. They tested their theories not just in sterile labs, but sometimes on unsuspecting targets, driven by the chilling belief that if they didn't perfect these silent killing methods first, KGB operatives would be using them on the streets of Washington. This was the terrifying, morally bankrupt incubator that birthed the idea of the dart gun. Fort Detrick scientists developed poisons that could silently disable guard dogs, laced cigarettes with deadly powders, and created alternatives to the standard L-pill for captured operatives. But the real breakthrough happened when Dr. Nathan Gordon began testing saxitoxin. Saxitoxin doesn't come from a lab, it comes from the ocean. Dater? Produced by microscopic algae, it builds up in shellfish during toxic blooms, creating what we know as red tide. Gram for gram, it is wildly more lethal than cyanide. Reportedly, it was Mary Embry, a young CIA researcher fresh out of high school, who first realized how devastating this natural poison could be as a weapon. Dr. Gordon made another horrific discovery. By mixing saxitoxin with water and freezing it, you could shape it into a dart the width of a human hair and just 1/4 of an inch long. It was small enough to pierce clothing unfelt, mimicking a bug bite. Fired from a modified pistol while frozen, it could reach its target completely undetected. This was the exact delivery system Colby placed on the committee's table. It was a device engineered around one single requirement, making an assassination look like a completely ordinary death. Let's break down the forensics of this ghost weapon. At its core, it relied on the frame of a standard Colt M 1911. However, the traditional firing pin and gunpowder were replaced by a nearly silent electrical or gas-powered mechanism. There was no muzzle flash, no smoke, and no loud bang to draw a single head in a crowd. The projectile was the true innovation. It was a frozen sliver of toxin-laced ice, propelled with just enough force to pierce skin and clothing from up to 100 meters away. The shooter could be standing across a street or train platform and remain completely unsuspected. At the moment of impact, the target feels almost nothing, maybe a faint sting. But underneath the skin, the frozen dart melts instantly, dumping the saxitoxin directly into the bloodstream. The reaction is fast and merciless. Saxitoxin blocks the sodium channels in the body's nerve cells, shutting down the electrical signals that control muscles, lungs, and the heart. The victim feels a tingling in their lips and fingers, followed by shortness of breath, abdominal pain, and a terrifying loss of coordination. Paralysis sets in, ultimately shutting down the muscles required for breathing. Within minutes, or sometimes seconds, the target dies of respiratory failure because their heart is starved of oxygen. To any bystander or doctor on the scene, it looks exactly like a massive, natural heart attack. The most clinical part of this weapon is the aftermath. Since the dart is just frozen water and toxin, it melts away entirely, leaving no physical evidence for a coroner. The entry wound is so tiny, it's easily missed entirely. Furthermore, saxitoxin breaks down so quickly in human tissue that it vanishes completely unless a pathologist runs a highly specific toxicology screen, which they would never order for a seemingly natural heart attack. It's the perfect crime because no one even knows a crime occurred. This leaves us with the ultimate lingering question. Was it ever actually used? The CIA's public stance has always been extremely careful. While Director Colby confirmed the weapon and the toxin stockpiles existed, he evaded questions about its actual deployment. He only stated that one specific operation involving the toxin was not in fact completed, leaving the door deliberately open. While declassified records have never definitively confirmed that the heart attack gun killed anyone, the Cold War is full of highly suspicious deaths. Magwad. Healthy foreign diplomats suddenly collapsing, Soviet defectors dying of premature cardiac events, and whistleblowers having perfectly timed, fatal heart attacks. None of these deaths come with a smoking gun, because the weapon was designed not to leave one. The story of KGB assassin Bogdan Stashinsky proves exactly why the CIA's fear wasn't just generalized paranoia. It was an active, terrifying reality playing out on the streets of Europe. In October 1957, Stashinsky was deployed to Munich, Germany. His target was Lev Rebet, a highly influential Ukrainian exile leader. But Stashinsky wasn't carrying a suppressed pistol or a garrote wire. He was carrying a lightweight aluminum cylinder, roughly the size and shape of a rolled-up newspaper. Inside this cylinder was a crushed glass ampule containing liquid cyanide. Stashinsky waited patiently in the shadowy stairwell of Rebet's office building. When Rebet walked past, Stashinsky raised the cylinder and fired the invisible cyanide vapor directly into Rebet's face. Rebet inhaled deeply. He collapsed instantly and died before hitting the ground. The KGB's weapon worked flawlessly. When the local German authorities examined Rebet's body, they found no trauma, no puncture wounds, and no obvious signs of foul play. The coroner's official verdict? A completely natural, unfortunate heart attack. The perfect murder had been executed in broad daylight. The KGB was so thrilled with the result that they sent Stashinsky back 2 years later to kill another high-profile target, Stepan Bandera, using an upgraded double-barreled version of the exact same weapon. Once again, the death was initially ruled natural causes. It was only years later, when Stashinsky defected to the West out of guilt and confessed to the killings, that the world realized these natural deaths were actually state-sponsored executions. He provided the CIA and Western intelligence with the precise technical schematics of how the Soviets were faking heart attacks. This revelation sent shockwaves through American intelligence. This was the chilling reality the CIA was competing against. They knew for an absolute fact that the Soviets already possessed a working, untraceable biological weapon. The pressure on the scientists at Fort Detrick to build an American version wasn't just theoretical anymore. It was an active arms race being fought with vapor and ice in the stairwells of a divided Europe. Both superpowers were racing to perfect the exact same invisible kill. If the Soviets were successfully using this tech in the late 1950s, it's incredibly hard to believe that the Americans built their own equivalent at Fort Detrick and simply never pulled the trigger. So we are left with a massive missing piece. We know the weapon existed, we know the toxin worked, and we know the CIA had the motive and capacity to use it. We also know the paper trail was designed to be destroyed. But the most unsettling part isn't the weapon itself. The gun Frank Church held in 1975 was already an aging relic from a defunct program. The real question is, what came next? If they had untraceable assassination tech 50 years ago, what do intelligence agencies possess today? We are now in an era of programmable pathogens, highly targeted synthetic nerve agents, and total digital surveillance, e-bull. If that clunky dart gun was state-of-the-art half a century ago, it's terrifying to imagine what quietly replaced it. Maybe the outrage following the Church Committee and new congressional oversight actually stopped these programs for good. Or maybe the only lesson these agencies learned in 1975 was to get much better at hiding their weapons. We may never know for sure. But the next time you hear about a perfectly timed natural death of someone in power, you might wonder for a second if nature actually pulled the trigger. If this deep dive hooked you, this is exactly what we uncover every week on Spycraft Declassified. Subscribe so you don't miss our next file. Because when it comes to Cold War secrets, the most dangerous stories are the ones they tried to bury forever.